Hi, I'm Bob Sweeney at the Edwin Brix Vineyard this year. Welcome back to another edition of the Juneau Garden. Who am I with here today?
I'm Marty Sell.
Marty Sell.
My family and I own the vineyard, and it's kind of a family affair. We've run it for the last 8 or 9 years.
So how did it get the name Edwin Brix?
Good question. Edwin is a family name. My middle name is Edwin. My father and grandfather's name was Edwin. My wife's father's name was Edwin. Her brother's name is Edwin. So it's an old kind of German name. And then Brix is the sugar content of grapes when you harvest them. So we combine the family name with a grape term to come up with Edwin Brix.
So you actually started the vineyard?
We started the vineyard in 2010, planting our first Marquette grapes, and then I've planted almost every year since then, and we have about 1,600 grapes now in our vineyard.
Okay. How many acres does that cover?
About 3.5 acres.
Okay. You think about grapes, you think Mediterranean climate, you think California and places like that. So what is good about growing grapes here in Wisconsin for making wine?
We found that this part of Dodge County, in northern Jefferson County is heavy in drumlins, these little hills and valleys that kind of run through the county that were created by the glaciers, and they pushed the limestone up into these little hills. And that geology makes almost the perfect conditions for growing grapes because of the limestone. Grapes don't like very good soil, they like rocky soil if they can get it, clay soil. This has worked out very well. We're the highest concentration of drumlins in the world right here in Dodge and Jefferson County. The second highest concentration is the Finger Lakes area of the state of New York, which up until the 1970s was the biggest grape growing area in the United States. So good conditions from that respect. The drumlins tend to drain the frost off, like this morning. We had a frost here, our first frost of the season, and down low at the bottom of the grapes it was freezing. Up a little bit higher we missed the frost, so that's good. But like you say, California is known for the grapes. The vinifera style grapes like Merlot and Chardonnay and Zinfandel and Cabernet can't grow in this climate. They die if it gets much below 20 degrees in the winter. So we need to grow cold climate grapes here in Wisconsin, and almost all of our grapes are produced through the University of Minnesota and their grape genetics program that they have there.
All right. Genetics, that's become really important in agriculture now, hasn't it?
It sure has. A guy by the name of Elmer Swenson grew up around Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and he spent his entire life trying to breed natural grapes from the Midwest with wine grapes, with vinifera. And he eventually tied in with the University of Minnesota, and it's really his work that spawned the industry here in Wisconsin and throughout the Midwest of having grapes that can survive our winters.
That's interesting. So what varieties do we have?
We have a bunch of different grapes, both red and white. Our red grapes are Marquette, Sabravois, and Frontenac. They're all cold hardy grapes, all through the University of Minnesota. Today we're picking the Frontenac first. Yesterday we picked the Marquette. These will be dry red wine grapes. Some of our Sabravois we picked last weekend, and we made them into a rosé wine, so they're a lighter wine. And then we have 4 different kinds of white grapes. We grow a Brianna grape, that's the name of the grape. We grow a La Crosse grape, a Prairie Star grape, and this year for the first time we harvested a Frontenac Blanc, which is similar to the red Frontenac we're doing, but bred to be a white wine grape.
It's all interesting. It all goes over my head, but it's interesting. Okay, so what about marketing?
We've done limited marketing at this point. We're in the process of getting our tasting room open. Later this year we'll open that tasting room, and we'd like to sell most of our grapes through our tasting room here on the property. We do have some limited retail exposure. Chill Zone Liquors in Beaver Dam handles our grapes. Rechecks has a couple of our wines as well. Kramer's Dairy in Watertown. So we do that. We do market on the internet. So anyone can look at our website, edwinbrix.com, and see all the wines we have to offer, the pricing, what kind of grape they are, what kind of wine they make.
So you sell most of them right from this location?
We do.
And advertising for
that? We've done limited at this point. We intend next year and the year after, once our tasting room's open, to get the word out a little bit more. We're kind of a best kept secret here in Dodge County right now.
Well, maybe we can do something about that with this video.
That'd be terrific.
Yeah. All right, should we go take a look at the vineyard?
We should. Let's do that.
Okay, now we're in some grapes right now, aren't we?
We are. We're in a block of our Sabrevaux grapes. Some of our younger grapes, I think these were planted in 2014, harvested for the first time in 2016. So for just a couple of years we've been picking these grapes.
Okay. Tell us about your arbors. How do you set those up?
Sure. Our arbors are set up kind of interestingly enough. The width is 10 feet apart on the trellis rows.
And that, you're planting them 10 feet apart?
No, the rows themselves
okay.
are 10 feet apart. And that's primarily because I've got a John Deere 3020 tractor, and that's about what I needed to get the tractor between the rows. If you go to California, you'll actually see rows as narrow as about 3 feet apart. But 10 feet works very well for us. The spacing of the grapes is 6 feet. So we have 32 grapes in a row, so we're about 190 feet length of each row, 32 grapes, 1,600 total. And our trellises are, we use natural cedar posts. We didn't use treated cedar. That'll probably come back to haunt me at some point, but I'm hoping that's for my children to worry about rather than me to worry about. We had actually higher fencing at Beaver Dam do all the work for us. They pound the posts in. We set 4 trellis wires on them, and then every year we train the grapes up from the first wire up to the second, third, and fourth wire along the way.
So you do a lot of trimming?
A lot of pruning. We will, starting in late February, early March, we will prune back all of the grape until about 1 inch of new growth. So we'll take about 1 inch of this year's growth and take everything else off of the grape. And so all the growth you see here is new growth this year, and next year the same thing will happen. It takes us quite a while. We prune pretty much the end of February, March into April. We enlist the help of some Dodgeland FFA students, so they come out after school and help us for a few hours if the weather's permitting. And we prune all the grapes off, then we pick up all the vines, pile them all up, and we end up burning the vines because we want to make sure that any disease that carried through during the winter is destroyed with the vines.
Okay. So you have four
trellis wires, yeah.
So along the bottom one, you have your main.
Right, and that's called the cordon. So the main stem comes up and then it separates horizontally.
And you have to train it for that by pruning, right?
In the very first year, as the grape grows up, you train a vine to go on there, and then years after, that cordon becomes the old wood of the grape moving forward.
And you have them how far apart planted?
6 feet.
6 feet apart. So you have to cut that off then too, the cordon, you say?
No, the cordon, the old wood cordon, that first horizontal on the first wire remains.
But that goes and goes and goes and goes all the way across?
No, it just stays the 6 feet.
Yeah, so you have to trim that off.
Oh, sure. We don't let it go longer than the 6 feet.
Okay, yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was getting at. But all the rest you want to grow as much as you can.
Right.
Okay.
And it'll be interesting. Normally our buds will break about the first week in May every year.
All your grapes?
Pretty much all. Within about 10 days we have bud break on all the different varietals. And then the shoots you see here will go up to the fourth wire. I would say by the middle of June, in the first 4 or 5 weeks, all of the growth you see here occurs. And then after that, we actually do quite a bit of summer pruning to keep the grapes neat and clean and able to be harvested later in the fall.
Okay. All right, good. Anything else here?
No, I think if...
I have some questions.
Sure.
What about the Japanese beetles? How do you handle those?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because the University of Wisconsin is actually studying our vineyard and about 20 others, and a young man from University of Wisconsin comes out about every 2 or 3 weeks and tests specific grapes. If you look closely in the vineyard, you might see some ribbons. Those are the grapes that he looks at every time he comes out. And he's testing to see how our vineyard compares to others relative to Japanese beetles. We spray.
With what?
Generally, the repellent for the beetles will be 7.
Okay.
So it's not any different really from the 7 you can buy retail.
Mm-hmm.
But we have our commercial applicator license. So we spray 7. We also spray for some fungal diseases. One of the differences in Wisconsin is, if you think about California, Napa and Sonoma, very dry climate. All their grapes are irrigated. We don't have to irrigate at all here because of the rain, but because of all the rain, we'll get molds and mildews and things like that growing on our grapes. So we have to protect against that a little bit too with our spray program.
Okay. What about controlling the weeds underneath the grapes?
We do it a couple different ways. We'll go through with weed eaters on occasion. Early in the year, we will hit it with a spray as well to keep it down, a form of not necessarily Roundup, but a lesser form of that to keep down some of the weeds. And then we try and limit that as much as we can. Mm-hmm. But weeds can be a problem. If we didn't do anything under the rows, the weeds would grow up into the grapes.
So weed eating.
Yeah.
Okay.
We go through with gas-powered hedge trimmers to do the pruning in the summer, because the grapes that you see here, if we wouldn't prune in the summer, we'd actually have the rows intertwined. They grow that far out into the rows. So we come through with hedge trimmers and cut the grapes off vertically in all the rows and at the top of the rows as well to maintain the shape we want on the grapes.
Okay. Keep it orderly, huh?
Keep them orderly.
What kind of effect does that have then on the production of the grapes?
You want the leaves. You want a fair amount of leaves. What would be ideal is that you have a lot of canopy, a lot of leaves, but you can still see through the vines. So if you look at a vine like this, we can still see through that to the next row. So that's almost perfect. The one behind you is probably a little light. And that was this grape in particular had a flea beetle infestation very early in the season, and that took its toll on that particular grape. So, but we like to have them so you can see through them. The sunlight hits the leaves. The leaves absorbs the sunlight that goes into the grape and produces your sugar. Ideally we'd like to get the sugar as high as we can by the time we pick.
And how do you determine that level?
What we do is we go through the vineyard with a baggie, and we pick 30 or 40 grapes just randomly as we walk through the vineyard.
But these are specific variety of grapes all in the same bag?
Right, all in the same variety. Mm-hmm. Squeeze that into juice, and then we have a little device called a refractometer, which we just put a drop of juice on it, and it will show us what that Brix content is. Mm-hmm. The grapes we're picking this morning are going to be about 20 Brix. The grapes we picked yesterday were about 24 Brix. Very difficult for us in Wisconsin to get much higher than 24. If you go out to California, you might see Brix as high as 29 or 30 in a grape. But a lot of our grapes will be anywhere from 18 to 24 when we pick them.
Is that due to the different varieties?
Due to different varieties, some of our white grapes we want to pick earlier because we want the taste and the juice to be just about ripe. If we leave them ripen too much, they get kind of soft and mushy in the grapes. So we'll take our Brianna grapes at about 16 Brix in the summer. That's our earliest grape, about third week in August. But the varieties as well. The Marquette is generally higher than the Sabrevaux or the Frontenac. I think the highest we've ever had in the 7 or 8 years we've been doing it is about 25 Brix. So 24 we got yesterday is pretty good. This has been an interesting year because it's been a great summer, a great spring. We had almost no frost this spring after bud break. Lots of hot weather this summer, enough rain. But then September came, and in September I think we've had about 16 or 18 inches of rain here in the vineyard. And what happens is as the grapes ripen, the sugar content, the Brix keeps going up. But then when it rains so much like it did in September, the grapes take on juice. They actually expand with juice from all the rain. That's good for the quantity of grapes, but it's not good for the sugar. So we actually have the sugar leveling out when we get so much rain. So that happened this year. I think it happened 2 years ago when we had a lot of rain in September as well.
That might be the new normal.
Might be, and very well might be. So that's a little bit about the trellis. If you can see the rocks underneath the grapes, that's kind of what all these hillsides are. They're full of not only the little rocks you see here, but a lot of the big limestones that are typical of this part of Dodge County.
Now, because there's so much limestone here, that should keep the acid level of the soil down as well. Is that important?
I think it is. The cold climate grapes in general are higher in acid than the vinifera, than the grapes you'd see in California. So we're battling the acid anyway, so that anything with the soil helps that. So I think the limestone does keep it down a bit.
Okay, now we're amongst the grapes that are being picked.
We are. We're in our Frontenac grapes. Two of our senior, most experienced pickers, Bob Zontag and Jeff Giese, are picking here. We use a little tool called a grape fork that Jeff is showing you here. It's just a little tool that has 2 razor blades on it, and all Jeff will do is find a clump of grapes, get close to the end of that clump, and clip them off with those razor blades before he puts them in the picking lug. So these are pretty heavy grapes. Been pulling off a lot of grapes this morning from this harvest.
So what brings you here? Why do you do this?
I'm actually probably one of the guys that's pretty much started when you started having these get-togethers and the picking operation and the bottling operation. I probably one of the first ones to.
You are.
I try and make every time we've got a opportunity to pick and bottle, try and make time to do that.
But why?
Just because it's fun. Just meet a lot of people. Look at it. First time I met Bob and we've been picking a couple times in a row here. So yeah, get to normally see the same people here, most of the time. So just a couple hours to get together and have a good time.
So you start at that end and working this way?
We do, and then if there's somebody in the middle, we'll stop and we just keep working until we're done. So.
And this is the last picking today, huh?
We're hoping to be done today. Yeah, we've got 10 rows to do today. They're on the 3rd row this morning. So, and these are the heaviest grapes. The grapes beyond these will be a little bit lighter. Should go a little quicker.
So what kind of effect did freezing have, or the frost have, on the grapes? Any?
Probably not enough frost last night to affect them negatively. I don't know that we could tell any of the grapes were frozen at all. The grass certainly had frost on it this morning. But it's good to get them off now that we're getting to that time of year. Frost is very early this year. Last year we were almost a month later to the first frost.
And who do we have with us now?
This is Ben Sell. This is our oldest son. Ben's really active in our work, helping me throughout the year, not only in the vineyard, but in pressing the grapes, in making the wine, and working with the wine throughout the year after the harvest today. Today his task is he's hauling the lugs of picked grapes from the vineyard up to our garage area that we use for the sorting and crushing and the stemming of the grapes along the way. So Ben really is involved in everything from pruning in the winter to pruning in the summer to helping me spray in the summer in our spray program to helping during harvest. So he's my go-to guy.
So is this your full-time job?
This is not my full-time job. Outside of this, sometimes it seems like it's a full-time job, but outside of that, I actually work with my dad in his architectural office as well. So,
okay.
So work with.
So he can't get away from me.
Hi.
Hi, now, who are you?
I'm Bob, and who are you?
I'm Lois.
Lois. Lois, what are you doing?
I am trying to sort grapes for my son, Marty.
He gets everybody working for him, doesn't he?
Oh, he does. He isn't merciful at all. No, here I'm an old lady, and he has me working like a slave.
So it looks like you've been doing this for a while.
I have.
Okay. Now, tell me about the sorting. What are you looking for here?
Okay, we pick out the dried off ones, and we throw them in here. And if there are any little green ones, we pick those off too. And other than that, they're fine, and we throw them in here, and then that's the good bucket, and that gets into the machine over here to be pressed.
So the machine over there is going to press the grapes.
Right.
And what are we going to get when we press them?
Well, you're going to get some juice, and then finally, after it's fermented enough and put into barrels, you'll get some good wine.
Do you like the juice, or do you like the wine?
Oh, I like them both.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you for the interview.
What is your name?
Nick Sell.
Nick Sell.
Yeah.
From the famous Sell family, huh?
Yeah, that I am.
What have we got in front of you here?
So this is the crusher destemmer. So basically it takes all the grapes that we're sorting, it crushes them, and it takes all the stems and spits it out. So we just have the grapes with the skins once we're all left over. So that's what's in the bucket down there.
So grapes and skins go this way.
Yep.
And over here,
We got just the stems.
something needs to be composted.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So that's what we get left over is all the skins and the
Juice and skins.
juice and skins.
Hi, Bob. These are the grapes we would have picked yesterday. These are our Marquette grapes. We fill the bin up. You just saw the crushing operation. Once the bin is full, We add a little oak powder to it to mellow the flavor a little bit, and then we inoculate the grapes with the yeast. So these grapes were inoculated last night about 7 or 8 o'clock, and they're starting to ferment. And what we do on a daily basis is we'll punch down these grapes to kind of mix them together, keep the yeast working through the operation, and eventually this cap of grapes on the top will form very hard. After about a week of fermentation, these were about 24 Brix when we harvested them yesterday. The sugar will turn into alcohol. In about 2 weeks we'll have all alcohol and no sugar left in here. The skins will all drop to the bottom, and then we'll take the juice that's left here, the wine at that point, put it into our press and press it into a stainless steel tank. And then the new wine will stay in a stainless steel tank for 6 or 7 months until it's ready for either going into oak barrels for its final fermentation or directly to bottling at that point.
Where are we now?
Okay, so we're down in the basement of our tasting room. This is where we do our final fermentation, the aging of our wine, and racking on a monthly basis for all of our wine.
What does racking mean?
Racking means, Bob, taking the wine from one tank, moving it to another tank. What happens is as the wine ages, any dead yeast that will fall to the bottom of the tank. And so what we do is we rack that wine off of that dead yeast, get rid of the dead yeast. That becomes garbage going out down the sewer, and the wine becomes cleaner and cleaner every time we rack. We'll rack our wines about once a month between now and next May or June along the way. So every time we do that, the wine becomes cleaner and cleaner. We monitor the wines at that point for the pH level to make sure everything is going well with the wine. And then next summer we make the decision what we're going to do with the wine. If it's a white wine or if it's our rosé wine, we'll go directly to bottle. We'll filter the wine at that point, and we'll bottle in our bottling operation the wine and store it in our basement cellar of our home is where we store all our finished wines. The red wines, like the Marquette wines you just saw in the Frontenac that we're doing today, they'll go through the same racking process between now and next summer, but then at that point they'll move into the oak barrels that you see at the back of this room. We use all French oak barrels. Those French oak barrels, we will put the wine in there for upwards of 2 years before we bottle that wine. So the oak aging, the wine we picked yesterday could take up to 3 years before it goes into a bottle if we go through the oak aging with it.
And what does the aging do for the wine?
One of the things we talked about a little earlier is that a lot of the northern climate grapes are high in acid. And so the red wines, especially that have a high acid content, the oak will mellow that wine along the way. So you'll find a much easier to drink wine after 2 years in a French oak barrel than wine that would be bottled right out of a stainless steel tank. Okay, now we're down in the cellar of our home. The cellar is where it really is our wine cellar. We use it to store all our finished product along the way. So throughout this kind of maze of this old farmhouse basement, we have our inventory of wine. As an example, here's a bottle of our Little Sister, which is a dessert wine that we make from our Frontenac, Marquette, and Sabravois grapes as a dessert wine. This cellar works out well because we really are never much more than about 60 degrees. The humidity is relatively high down here, and that's very good for aging wine in bottles. Um,
So where do you get your bottles from?
We buy our bottles from a couple of different places. One of them is in the state of New York, the other in the state of Michigan. Generally, the Michigan supplier is a little bit better for us. One of the things we run into winemaking with a small winery is shipping costs. So if we order a couple thousand bottles, the difference in freight is really what'll tell us which supplier to use for our wine bottles. Same thing for our tanks and our barrels. The costs can be very comparable whether you buy from California or you buy from Missouri, but a lot of times the freight will be the difference in where you purchase from along the way.
And your labels?
Labels, we actually work with a small company, two small companies in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We design all the labels, send them the designed labels. They print them and they work closely with the company that makes the label applicator for the wine bottles. So we work with the two of them for all of our labels.
Okay.
Here's a few more of our wines. Earlier this year, in August, we bottled our Marquette wine after it had been in those French oak barrels for 2 years. So this is our first Marquette Reserve. This is a wine we actually do as an unfiltered wine, so it retains all the flavor. Almost all the rest of our wines will go through 3 or 4 filterings before we go into the bottling of the wine. We make a couple of different wines along the way. We actually offer 11 different wines. One of them is a fruit wine, a wine we make with Kirschbaum Strawberry Acres out of Beaver Dam, and we call it Wild Stand Strawberry Wine. This has been a very popular, sweeter fruit wine for us. It's the only non-grape wine that we make at Edwin Brix Vineyard. And we use a little bit different label for that wine because it is not a grape wine.
Any last words?
Well, other than thank you for coming out and taking a look at Edwin Brix Vineyard. We hope to have our tasting room open later in 2018, and we're hoping you can come out and volunteer to help pick or sort or bottle along the way, or certainly come and visit us in our tasting room once it opens up later the fall and winter of this year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.